Have you checked the children? Your little master.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers, along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail the Stephen King. That's Reezy. It is a holiday week, and unfortunately, I know a lot of people whose health is falling into some of the craziness that is going on, a couple close friends and stuff like that, and I'm not even feeling 100%, so, beg your pardon if that is, the case in this particular review, but show must go on, as we all say, and that show specifically being the horror show. So obviously, bienvenidos and welcome. And this is a show I do every Tower Tuesday, and I had decided a few months ago that I was going to be going back through the Dark Tower comic books, most notably this massive omnibus. My God, look at this goddamn thing. But yes, I was going to be going back through the comics because myself and my cohort in crime, Cecil Laird, had done the first two installments, or the first two arcs, I guess is the proper way of putting it. Never finished stuff up. I think it's it's over 10 years old at this particular point, so it's not like a golden anniversary sort of situation. I guess it was upon the initial publication of The Gunslinger Born, which was the first one that I did, but today, we are talking about The Long Road Home. And so, the interesting thing about this particular thing, which was done by that, so we had Jaime, obviously, illustrating the fuck out of this thing, but we also, as I just have to bring it out because this omnibus is just so badass looking. So, there you go. But we also had Robin Firth, who is essentially, as I said in the previous video, presumably, the Dark Tower historian for Sai King. And so she has been at his right hand, most notably in those later installments when he did the stretch run and did 5, 6, and 7 all in succession, that she was there to be like, okay, well, if you're writing it that way, that continuity isn't going to work. And so she was almost like a fact checker. I mean, it's really Robin and Bev Vincent who did the Road to the Dark Tower books and has helped out with the concordances and everything. Those are your two biggest people that you should be consulting if you're trying to keep up with all the Dark Tower lore. And if the fact that Sai King had to actually have additional people well, he's aging, he's getting up there, and there's so many other ideas, obviously, mostly of Holly Gibney going through his head, but nonetheless, yeah, it was very cool what they did with these comic books with Robin, and then, Jaime, as I mentioned, and Peter David, that's the actual writer who, scripted the comics, and Robin was a consultant, and so, yeah, whereas the first one was straight up adaptation, this one in The Long Road Home was a little more interesting in the fact that it had the opportunity, as you see in the later installments of this comic series from Marvel, to fill in the gaps. And that's where, for me, I mean, as a Tower junkie, to quote Eddie Dean, that's where it gets a little bit more interesting because, spoilers, it's essentially the first bit was an adaptation of Wizard and Glass, and also some bits here and there of the original Gunslinger, those flashbacks and stuff. So we're dealing with young Roland, 100%. And so, whereas in the Wizard and Glass book, despite how monumentally massive it was, it told us that, okay, we have Bert, and we have Elaine, obviously, and, our gunslinger, Mr. Deschain, going back to Gilead, and it doesn't really elaborate on much in the book itself, as opposed to the fact that, we know that, the love of his life has died in this tragic Romeo and Juliet sort of fashion, but even beyond that, we also have the fact that he is, stuck in this Maryland's grapefruit, because we know there's all of these different orbs, and, we'll get into Black, 13, all the different stuff later, but yeah, he is essentially, his soul, his essence is trapped within this orb after the loss of his love. And the cool thing that they really expand upon in the comic here, in this particular arc, in this run, is that it shows why Roland became so obsessed and why he had this trajectory of being very degaff about the people who loved him and who he previously loved, and how it's very much like, tractor beam, the short-sightedness, the fact that he becomes obsessed, and it is very much about one thing, and they elaborate on it significantly, much more so than even in the King source text, which is really dope in this. And Jaime, the art is fantastic, as you guys are seeing right now. It's still very much a enshadowed kind of thing, and I feel like it really emphasizes in a lot of ways, and upon this reread especially for me, the darkness within the storytelling and the disassociation and the obsession and all of the fascination that, for me as a Tower junkie, back to Eddie Dean, really comes into that. And so just story-wise, at least, if we're going to retread through that, they're leaving Tambri. They're trying to make their way back to Gilead. They have been found out. Our trio, the original Ka-Tet, the OG Ka-Tet, as I like to call them. And at the end of the previous proceedings, they killed Jonas, they killed DePape, Reynolds is the only one left. And he's after them, and a bunch of people from Hambry are after them too, along with a few peeps from the Good Man. And so, small amount of Farson's forces, but yet also some of the people from Hambry as well. And they, it just really gives an interesting chance. I felt like Bert and Elaine were not given their proper due in the original run, and that was 7 issues. They had a lot of ground to cover. And so in this particular one, it's only 5 issues in comparison, and if I'm gonna properly consult the notes, I believe it was March of 2008 when it debuted. And cool little statistic is that it was the #1 selling comic book of all comic books in March of 2008. So that shows the fact that the series was landing. It was really captivating people, whether they were big-time, constant readers that were experiencing it in a visual style for the first time, aside from all the great illustrations that we had in those 7 volumes. Well, it was 7 at that time, I think. Yeah, that's right, because .5 did not come out till a great deal later. We're still hoping for an 8th installment. We'll see. But yeah, so it topped all of the sales by over 20,000. I think the New Avengers was like the closest thing nipping at its ankles, man. And it sold over 123,000 copies in the first month. So the fervency was very real, and rightfully so, because it is captivatingly done. I still love the fact that the high speech is so evidently put together, especially from our narrator. And that's really, upon this revisit, one of my favorite things, and I know I mentioned this in the previous video where I was talking about the Gunslinger Born, but I feel like it's just as prevalent, if not more so. And yes, it is kind of expositionary, whatever. That's how you have to kind of bring people up to speed when they don't know about the Manny, when they don't know about all of these different aspects of the lore, and even like what happens with Shimi at the Dogen. That is one thing that they really expand upon interestingly, because for those who are aware, Shimi is a minor character, but that does become a little bit more pivotal when he is revisited in the 7th installment, where we're bringing back all kinds of different characters, like, Brodigan and whatever, as breakers. And so the fact that they kind of flesh out what happens in between with him, I find it so engaging and so freaking cool. And the fact that he is like legit badass. there is that whole movement that happened with Stranger Things, right? Where it was like, justice for Barb, Well, it's justice for Shimi in this, because of the fact that he legit saves the day. Roland is stuck in this ball for most of the 5-issue run. And yet, it's also, in some ways, justice for the Crimson King, because I've gone on record various times about the fact that you build up the most gangster-ass villain in all of Stephen King's universe, even beyond the, is it a crow, is it a raven, Martin /Flag Man in Black argues about it a couple points in the comic, which I find very amusing. But, he is still a subordinate to the Crimson King. He's like a lieutenant, so to speak. And yet, This actually is the most fearsome portrayal of the Stephen King be-all, end-all villain, or at least in the framing of the Dark Tower. It is definitely reassuring, at least, to be reminded that, you know, the Crimson King was such a badass, was supposed to be the be-all, end-all, which well, I mean, it's not a they sort of thing. It's Sai King kind of falling short in that regard, but nonetheless, you even get some great stuff with Martin in this, or, you know, Flag, or whatever you want to call him. He's referred to specifically as, you know, Mr. Broadcloak in this, but yeah, he has one particular bit where Roland is in the dream world and stuck in the grapefruit, and they have this palaver between the two of them, which is very reminiscent of what we get in the first book, and yet it's not quite as cosmic, but it's still very intriguing, which I appreciate. And, you know, he has a line at one point where he says, "True face? What makes you think I have one?" I thought that was a brilliant little bit of dialogue that was put there. And another one of my favorite lines in this, because the writing is fantastic and it's very dense. It's not a comic where you can read through an issue in, like, 10 minutes or something, and I have unfortunately faced my fair share of those where it's very visual centric, and yet the writing is like, the dialogue isn't excessive, and it's not really doing all of the excessive world building, which is such a necessity. One of my favorite parts: what point is there at evil villains attempting evil deeds if great heroes aren't around to try and stop them? So you have to have the ebb and the flow, the yin and the yang, like the back and the forth, and that's what makes these sort of situations so engaging, so compelling. It is a big friggin' thing, and yeah, and despite the fact that our hero is stuck in, like, kind of a dream world throughout most of it and almost dies, if not for the heroism of Shimi. And I know that they also have Shimi's Tale, I think, is the one-shot, if I remember correctly, but this just really grows to further develop the characters of our side homies, you know, in Elaine and Bert, and yeah, and solidify not only, you know, Bert's feistiness and less of the sarcasm that I love from the source material, actually. So that's maybe one thing, but his frustration is very evident, and the fact that he is a tough SOB. But the touch and all of the abilities of Elaine are very much front and center within this, and I appreciate that. I just really love the fact that we got to have more about these characters following the just drastically depressing demise of Ms. Delgado, and the cold and just hardening of Roland, which is when we initially encounter him, you know? The Man in Black fled across the desert and Gunslinger followed. Like, this is the makings of that character, essentially. And it's from the mental battles, and it's from all of that just depression and sadness that is put on full display and shown in a very just cruel, horrible fashion. Like, seeing, as opposed to visualizing it in your own head, seeing this charred corpse of Susan is so horrible and so sad. I still feel in some ways that they kind of just cliff notes, like, rushed to it at the back half of, like, I wish that first series, you know, The Gunslinger Born, could have been 8 issues, 10 issues, you know, maybe even 12, just so the fact that the demise, I mean, they do so much service to Eyebolt Canyon and all of Farson's forces getting killed there, but I felt like they really rushed to the sad demise of Susan after giving so much care and consideration to just the building of this Romeo and Juliet. But, you know, once again, the strengths that we have in this second arc is the fact that it is filling in those voids, but not doing it in some sort of half-assed disservice sort of situation. Like, you can tell that not just from the visuals from Jai, you know, and not just from Peter, David, and Robin working together. Like, there is a massive reverence, and I still contend that it comes out more than anything from the narration. And there is another bit in here that I wanted to read, and it's a really, really dope. So when I say redemption for the Crimson King, I mean, just look, man. Like, yeah, the Mordred stuff, whatever. You know, his little spider son that we get in those later installments, whatever. But just in the fact that I felt like the Crimson King was done so poorly with his silly maniacalness, you know, trapped in the tower, whatever, and some of the dialogue, like, I feel like those who put this together, the esteemed team that I mentioned, were very much about trying to make him fearsome again, which I truly appreciate. And this is from when Roland is stuck inside the grapefruit, and he is, well, first and foremost, man, talk about some interesting sort of addition, revision in the fact that he's calling him cousin, and the fact that apparently homie spread his spider seed, and all of the craziness with regards to that. But let's just to give you a sense of the dialogue and the awesomeness of it. Do you begin to understand, cousin? I am no usurper. I simply want what is rightfully mine. A kingdom restored to the glorious chaos that existed before the Dark Tower spun coherent worlds from a web of disorder. A time when rules meant nothing and nothing meant everything. Long ago, the tower barred itself against the shapeshifters of the Prim, guarding natural laws like a virgin would her chastity. But as a mortal descendant of Arthur L., you, Roland, can make the tower spread her maidenly legs. Your guns, or rather, the guns that you will inherit from your father, are the key, since they originated from within the tower. Going deep into lore and even just building upon it, which I appreciate so very much. Together, cousin, you and I will climb to the tower's top, claim the throne that overlooks the oriel windows of many colors, and destroy the many worlds so that the people of the Prim can swim freely again. The wreckage of the multiverse will provide a feast for generations to come. Can you not see us ruling over it together, cousin? Will it not be glorious? This is good shit, dude. And just once again, the fact that it is just being so respectful with everything that King had initially laid down, and just beautifully illustrated. I mean, everything is so top-notch about this. You know, we have Treachery next, and then there's two others, and I'm going through the entire series. A numerous amount of arcs within each, I guess, like, storyline, so to speak. So this is still fleshing out the young Roland awesomeness, and then we do eventually, with the second series, get to adaptations of things like the Little Sisters of Eluria, and, you know, Slow Mutants, and, you know, the Gunslinger Palaver bit with the Man in Black, which I've been trying to make into a short film for quite a while. But it's just very fascinating, and I know they switch up artists here and there, but in this initial run, and the 5 different sets of stories that we get, it's phenomenal. And I think if you are a Tower junkie, it will legit make you appreciate the series even more. You know, there's little spoilery Easter egg stuff, like the fact that Elaine and Bert are attacked by wolves, and, you know, I mentioned the rise of Shimi, obviously, but I don't like the blams on the page. The fact that when there's gunshots and certain, like, action moments, like we get blam, I don't know if that's like a nod to the Batman in Days of Old or whatever. But nonetheless, I really love these Dark Tower comics, and revisiting them is obviously making me inherently inclined to be like, God damn it, for 2022, I need to just go back down on the path of the beam. I need to reread. I need to make another journey to the tower. It just has to friggin' happen. And I mean, when this awesome show first became a thing, it was when I was reading the Dark Tower books, well, rereading them for the first time. But yeah, all those videos are here on The Horror Show in the Stephen King Focus playlist that we have. And, you know, thoughts, prayers for quick recovery to some loved ones of both myself and Cecil, who have come down with a little bit of craziness because, you know, Transformer variants of crazy sorts and stuff like that. So be safe, everybody. I know I was at the theater for No Way Home, and it's like the most packed theater of all that I've seen since this Pandeezy crazy has been going down. But nonetheless, if you have not checked out these comic books that Marvel did, and I know they were re-released through, I believe it's Simon & Schuster who distributes the predominance of Cy King stuff. They're terrific. They've been, the ones that we have at least been reviewing right now have been rebranded as the Dark Tower Beginnings, but nonetheless, they are available. You can find them on Amazon. You can then go to your local comic store maybe and get some back issues, but there's great paperbacks and hardcovers of these separate arcs. This one being The Long Road Home, and I love how it just tells a little bit more of a tale that King had already laid the groundwork for. It's really rad status. So, extending a grande gracias. I'm Jaime Fuego. You can find more on all social media sectors, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube. Greatly appreciate the pageantry and, everybody stopping through, especially during the holiday season. Yeah, liking, sharing, subscribing, doing all of that jazz is supremely appreciated. Next week is a kind of up in the air sort of episode. It might be a year-end review, or it might be more Children of the Corn. I guess we will see as far as that Patreon stuff goes. We appreciate any sort of Patreon support here at The Horror Show, where you can tell us what to do. Films to review, commentaries, boogie boxes. There's the proper terminology. And yes, also, there's the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group, which you can check out if you feel so inclined. Lots of great palaver amongst 1,000+ peeps on there. Very awesome kef and, just discussion amongst everybody else. And most notably, right back there. See it? Yeah. 11/22/63. That just celebrated a golden anniversary, and it is the current book of the month for December. We are going to be talking about it on Happy Festivus, Christmas, holidays, Kwanzaa, all the rad statusness. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of what has been definitely a crazy year, but it has been enriched so significantly because all of you guys and tuning into this program. So, I've been Fuego, y'all been Rat Status, and until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, sin amigos. I hope we have been well met. Say thank you, and that we share more of this palaver sooner rather than later. And until then, remember to stay scared, and definitely read Stephen King. Dizam, this sucker is huge. Wow.